Actually, that's the kid from the camp, only he's not digging up bodies, but frogs. They accumulate around cemeteries because Kermit is really goth these days. His biggest customer for frogs is Beauvais, since some frogs can secrete a substance similar to blowfish balls. Also part of the small world is that they're being tailed by Private Dunham, who had escorted Mulder to Beauvais' cell earlier. Dunham's here to warn them that Beauvais had threatened to take all the soldiers one by one until they were released back to Haiti, and Wharton responded by ordering regular beatings of the refugees. He believes that voodoo is at work, and he shares the story of how back home a guy cheated someone on a real estate deal, so his daughter came down sick and died.
She died 5 minutes past midnight on her wedding day. And when they did an autopsy to try and figure it out, all they could find was a bunch of snakes squirming around inside her belly.
See, Scully, that proves that magic's at work. Otherwise, those snakes would have suffocated trying to live in her belly. Or it didn't actually happen, Mulder. Okay, I understand what each of those words means, but you string them together, they don't make any sense. While this distraction's going on, the kid bolts, and despite Mulder's pursuit that is not entirely comical, he vanishes at the end of a pier. Well, you can't have anything to do with this. That's witches, not voodoo. With that dead end, there's nothing left but to confront Wharton about the accusation of beatings, but all he cares about is how his troops are being abused by this whole situation. A little breakfast should help. I said no ketchup! Well, he'll handle this the way he usually handles frustrations, giving Beauvais a beating. Outside, Scully gets ready to drive off, only someone's wrapped a branch of thorns around the steering wheel, and she slits her hand on it. Given that McCulkin had some kind of poison in him, and that the kid was collecting frogs likely to serve as the source for that poison, Scully immediately takes the thorn in to get checked to make sure that it wasn't poisoned. Or, here's an even cleverer plan than that. Throw the branch out the window and forget the whole thing. At the motel, Mulder discovers a playing card stuck in his door with the number 10 on it, so he waits on County Road 10, and sure enough, there's a visitor. It's X. This is going nowhere, he explains. The investigation, not the episode. This mess is basically revenge for what happened to some of our troops down in Haiti, even though these specific people had nothing to do with that. And that soon, this place was going to essentially vanish, like a Brigadoon was an internment camp. In other weird news, Scully's found Dunham dead in Mulder's bathtub, and Mulder brings in his killer, McAlpin, who's still wandering around in a zombie state. The natural question, though, is how did a man with a working brain on par with a gerbil manage to slip out of a military hospital on a secure base without being stopped? Though he starts to become more lucid after a while. Wharton talks him into signing a confession and follows it up by saying that Beauvais's dead. Suicide. He beat himself to death. Very tragic. However, Dunham is a member of the old, if anything should happen to me, school of sneakery, so McAlpin's wife calls them over to give them an envelope, a passport to the final act. It's a picture of Beauvais and Wharton together in Haiti. So Mulder and Scully break into Wharton's office. Hey, if a zombie can wander out of the place without getting noticed, 2 FBI agents can certainly sneak into it. I'm sure at this point that security is just a screen door that doesn't close properly. Scully makes a discovery.
Dunham and Gutierrez both filed complaints against Colonel Wharton. They both cited incidents of abuse, dates, times.
Oh, and also, he keeps animal claws attached to his files. Doesn't seem important, but just figured, completeness sake. They also discovered dog tags. The military kind, not for the dog that they found. Only to be interrupted by Wharton's aide. However, once they show the bones of the first victim is in Wharton's trunk, yeah, he's practicing voodoo. Jeez, you think as a master villain and a colonel I'd have some henchmen to do this crap work for me. He's doing some voodoo to Beauvais's body, so Mulder and Scully rush out to catch him, except Scully's not doing so hot. Her sore is getting worse and she has scurvy or something, and then some kind of hallucination. It's either voodoo or that Advil that she had earlier. Side effects may include dizziness, dry mouth, nausea, or Haitian crawling out of your hand and strangling you. See a doctor if Haitian strangles you for longer than 4 hours. Luckily, the good luck charm saves her, but Mulder's in trouble. When he tries to get Wharton, the Colonel stabs a sack. We couldn't very well do voodoo without some kind of voodoo doll, right? But Beauvais' body arises to curse him for his evil and blows magic powder in his face. I'm telling you, wouldn't the Greys be friggin' shocked if they came to enslave us and got a face full of voodoo powder? Enjoy the belly full of snakes, Gorblat, ha. Wharton's dead, so that's all resolved now. The refugees are going to go home because he was a load-bearing villain. Once he's removed, then the whole crisis just gets fixed. But Scully learns that the kid with the frogs isn't going back. He actually died in a riot 6 weeks ago. And he's not the only dead person still around. Wharton is in fact alive, or rather, buried alive! Buried alive! Despite my snark, I'm going to give this one a stamp of recommended. It has a few issues, but it's really creepy and engaging. I wasn't too sure at first, but the moment they found McAlpin walking up that road, I was hooked. It leaves some unanswered, in a good way, questions, like was the bloody ham Beauvais' work, or was Wharton having a small reaction from having used so much of that zombie stuff on other people? What was the relationship between the two men, and did Beauvais have anything to do with that kid, or was that completely unrelated? But these are more questions for speculation rather than de hand de verletzt with questions from plot holes. The obvious criticism I'd make, though, is that Wharton is a bit too ubiquitous for having no help. I mean, nobody noticed the commanding officer of the facility drawing voodoo symbols under Scully's car. But despite that, it was still a worthwhile outing.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
C'est mal, ouais. C'est pour mourir. Crois-moi qu'il peut ça faire.